But I was just going to say, this sounds like it could be a really great conversation because we are basically at the same place and the same time for the most part. We just got our game sent to the manufacturers for our prototype print run. It's not 100% complete, but it was far enough along that we felt like the product we would get back from them would be usable for reviewers to do overviews of the game. You're in the weeds of getting the game made, but I mean, we were there just, 6-8 months ago.
It's time for an adventure in the worlds of user experience and game design. On
Level 4
of the Design Thinking Games podcast, join old school UXers and aspiring game designers Michael Schofield, Tim Broadwater, and an array of quirky characters from pixelated heroes to mischievous NPCs in search of the ultimate player experience. Design thinking is a process that is applied to different types of games in this podcast. If you're wondering whether your favorite games have already come up, you can listen through the backlog at designthinkinggames.com. Now, Rapid Protobot, fire the design thinking laser.
Well, I'm Danny Ayub, and I'm one half of Moth Studios, and the other half is
Joel Watts. Hey, I'm Joel Watts. I'm the other half of Moth Studios. Danny and I have been working together on and off for about going on 20 years now. We came from a filmmaking background. We really were aiming to be writers and directors of our own films. And, life kind of took us in some different directions. But when Danny came to me with the idea for a card game, us being two Magic the Gathering players, I was really all in on his idea because it felt like a way for us to start our own Magic in a way.
So it was our freshman year of college, and we had a class together, I think, or
Two classes together. We had a politics class, and then it was into an art class. And as we became friends, we stopped going to the art class and just started hanging out.
yeah, we weren't the best students.
One of the first big projects we attempted together was writing a TV show here in Austin, Texas. In fact, I moved to Austin, Texas to pursue that. And then we also produced short films together and a few other projects. What happened was in those years, we learned how to work together. We learned where our strengths were. We learned how to listen to each other. And we learned, where there's good friction, where there's bad friction, and how to put those things together and sort it all out. So I think like everything was just us building up to finally coming up to a project that we could succeed at.
I had an idea to make a game. It wasn't until Joel and I had worked together that X Seekers of Fortune was born, right? So I engaged him because I knew that he was exceptionally good at world building and thinking in terms of systems. He had taught me Magic years before. And so I think Joel and I have learned how to leverage each other's strengths and how to navigate our creative differences in a way that has been consistently productive over the course of our friendship.
There was a lot of experience gaining that happened through our early years. I do think there was a lot more like what would you say, fruitless conflicts and stuff like when we were younger men. And I think, maturity and experience gave us a lot of the tools we needed, probably some therapy too. They gave us the tools that we needed to actually be able to sort through all of that and speak our feelings better. I think that it's a great example of learning your own emotions and learning to give yourself up to the creative process and not hold on so dearly to those things. Because I don't know, I'm not sure what y'all guys did in y'all's 20s, but it could be a project ending discussion over one line of dialogue that ultimately 100%. Would be inconsequential. So I think it's just a maturation experience, and humbling has come a long way in all of that too.
We actually did a full episode of our podcast called Navigating Creative Differences. And we kind of break down, how we approach creative work. And a lot of it has to do with making sure that you're actually listening to your partner, understanding what's important to you, what's important to them. And the other thing that I think we do, and I think you'll both appreciate this given your background, is no matter where we are in the business, what we're doing, we stop, we ask ourselves from first principles, what is minimum viable product for this stage? And we say, okay, let's define that clearly. And then as we're navigating through that stage of the creative process, we have this wonderful check against, hey, okay, do we actually have to figure this out right now? Does this fit into minimum viable product, or is this a question for later? Does this conflict with minimum viable product in some way. So I think for us, we've really excelled because I think Joel and I both really appreciate systems. And as we've gone along, we've tried to systematize our approach as much as possible. And it's worked for us.
Whether it be Danny or myself, whenever we do have a outlandish idea, we present it as an outlandish idea. We're like, it was like, okay, this is going to sound crazy, but what if we completely change the game from the core, And then Danny will be like, no, yes, Joel, that is crazy. Let's not do that.
Yeah.
That sounds like a different game, Joel.
Every now and then, though, those come through. One of the interesting things is this is where first principles thinking comes in. There's lots of times where we have it in our head that what we need to do to achieve MVP is one thing that's based off of our historical data set of how all the things that we've seen in the world prior to this moment have fit into a given box. So, one example is when we were trying to determine what the card backs would be for our game. Magic the Gathering has had the same card backs for over 30 years. So, we knew that when we created the game, that we needed to have the same card backs for the three decks and that they needed to be able to exist over time and that they needed to be congruent with a bunch of different settings. And that was just something that we had assumed was true because Magic had done it. And we got stuck because our designer provided us with these fantastic card backs, but they did not fit the universal nature of what we felt like our card
Mm.
backs needed to be. And we stopped and we said to ourselves, is it true, is it really true that the card backs need to all be the same? Or is it possible that because we are making a different kind of game and because we're making an all in one box experience and because we anticipate that the people who really play our game down the line are going to sleeve their cards anyway, do the backs really need to all be the same? Or is that just something that we kind of smuggled in as an assumption? It's defining the use case and understanding functionally what do we need in order to progress to the next stage of the process. When you get to minimum viable product for what a game is in the market that people are interacting with, how do you even begin to define that? It really is experiential. We say to ourselves, what is it the experience that we want our players to have at the end of the day? Are they having fun? A lot of our discussions when we're playtesting and making decisions about what goes into the game, what doesn't go into the game, has to do with how it makes people feel and mitigating negative play experience and promoting positive play experience. You see people drawing Action X cards, which are sort of the real flavorful cards in the set. They're the sites you're going to discover. They're the relics you're going to uncover. They're the heroic feats you're going to perform. And when you see a new player pick up a card and they go, oh, wow, okay, this is cool.
I'm wondering a little bit why you wanted to make a TCG, because it seems to be like one of those things to where, as you know from a gamer, you're like, oh, if I go into it, I'm just going to waste a bunch of money and I'm going to do this. And it's like, who else will play? And so anything you can speak to about your history and what made you go this way.
Well, I mean, the pressure that caused us to create the diamond that is X Seekers of Fortune, it's so hard to keep up with Magic the Gathering or any other TCG. And you also wonder if it's worth it. And then the cards that you buy, will they decrease in value, increase in value? Do you need to buy the card now because it's increasing in value? There's a lot of factors, especially outside of the game, that make TCGs a little bit, of a literal gamble to get into. And that's one thing that Danny and I wanted to avoid in making X Seekers of Fortune. And that's why X Seekers of Fortune is an all in one box experience. Now, we're not saying we're never going to expand it. We do have plans on expanding X Seekers of Fortune, but every time we expand it, you buy one product and you get everything you need to keep up with the game. If everything goes according to plan and we release 5 or 6 iterations, different sets of X Seekers of Fortune, you'll go to different worlds. Like right now, we're doing the traditional desert adventure. We compare it to Indiana Jones all the
Mm-hmm.
time. But down the line, we want our second adventure to be like on the high seas, and we want our third adventure to be something like an urban noir detective story. And then all of a
Nice.
sudden you have all these different cards, and if you love our game, you can then take the Action X deck and curate it yourself and build it with the cards from the different sets. But if you just want to play the game, you just have to go out and buy the box that's available to you at the time. And we really wanted to make sure that we weren't hitting that pain point of other TCGs by having it to where you're constantly chasing new cards. There's constantly new sets. Old sets are no longer relevant. Ultimately, that demon, what, I don't want to say demon, maybe that dragon that you're chasing by playing Magic the Gathering or other TCGs is what made me stop playing Magic the Gathering, and made it to where when Danny was like coming to me and being like, hey man, you want to play Magic? I'm like, no. And then eventually he's like, hey man, do you want to create a new game? And I was like, that sounds much more up my alley.
Nice. Design Thinking Games is not a drug related podcast or supports demonology.
Design Thinking Games, brought to you by the Satanic Temple.
Yeah, we've created a clear contrast with the Super Secret podcast, which is in favor of demonology and drug use.
Yeah.
Speaking of demonology and drug use, I think it's a really good opportunity now to. How about I just pause randomly?
Been there.
You're lucky you edit this podcast.
Like Pazuzu grabs me. Thirst is a 2 to 4 player vampire versus vampire game of Dominion, in which players become powerful, monstrous, and bloodthirsty vampires. Rise from the graveyard hungry to find that you are not the only creature of darkness in town. Fight other vampires for dominion over neighborhoods and for influence. Hunt, but hunt wisely. The first vampire to accrue an influence score of 10 wins and can finally slake their thirst. Thirst is on Kickstarter. Sign up to get notified of its launch at thirstboardgame.com. Find Thirst and other things we're working on at designthinkinggames.com. With a kind of like a strategic knowledge of the other competitors in the space. What is X Seekers of Fortune? Why is it different? Who's going to like it?
So, X Seekers of Fortune, players take on the role of a fortune seeker out on adventure, looking for lost sites and legendary relics. They are going to perform heroic feats along the way to outfox the rivals. At its very core, it is a game similar to Magic in that it is a race, but unlike Magic, it is not combat based. It's about the first person to complete 5 adventures. So a lot of the game is a lot more about strategic use of your resources and foiling your rivals' plans. Whereas a lot of TCGs we feel are very combat focused. It's all about just getting your opponent dead. It's an all-in-one box experience. It's a curated meta. One of the big intimidating things about Magic is you show up to the store with your deck that you just put together, and now you're playing against someone who has a $2,000 deck, and they just roll over you as you would expect. The barrier to entry, the barrier to even being competitive is so high. We wanted to have an experience where it's like, okay, let's see who's really the more skillful player. It's a 3 shared deck game. So we're playing from the same resource pool. Any given day, I could draw this card, you could draw it the next day. I think also one of the other main challenges with Magic, especially now with the amount of product saturation, you're having 8, 9 product releases at minimum a year being released, so much to keep up with. It's just, your head spins just trying to. And so we wanted to create an environment where it's like, okay, I play X Seekers of Fortune. I like it. I don't play the game for 5 years. I'm just going to go buy the same box. I know I can just read up and I can have that experience and I'm right back into it. I don't have to chase down cards. I don't have to understand a meta. I just play what's in the box with my friends. And then if I'm really into X Seekers of Fortune, as Joel alluded to, over time, I'm collecting all these game pieces. I can curate my own experience. I can say, hey guys, come over. I created my own X Seekers of Fortune and it is way better than anything that's been released. We really want our community to feel like they are able to design their own version of the game once we give them enough components.
We went to Norman, Oklahoma, of all places, where our podcast editor and his wife live. She helps us out with social media, and they work at a brewery called 405 Brewing. We went out early one day, held an event, an all-day event. People could come by. We'd buy their first drink. We had pizza, all that jazz. We had 2 guys who played Magic the Gathering, who had loved Magic the Gathering. They sat down across from each other to just try out the game. And I swear they were there for probably more than 2 hours just game after game after game, playing it over and over again. We've had
Nice.
that experience multiple times, and not just with TCG players, but also with people who don't play TCGs who are intimidated by them. Specifically, a young woman who was a huge tabletop player, Dungeons and Dragons, everything. She said she never wanted to play TCGs, but then she sat down and played our game, and she was like showing it to her husband by the end of the night.
If you stumbled onto this station, welcome back. Your host, Mr. Graves, returns with a brand new collection of terrifying tales designed to chill you to the bone.
Make the biggest discovery this world has ever seen.
Help! What is happening to me?
We also have an assortment of characters that are just dying to meet you.
It took him to hell.
Can you understand us better now?
You may need to leave the light on for this one. Your Horror Show, Season 2, premiering on all podcast platforms May 14th. Listen, if you dare.
Right now, X Secrets of Fortune is, we just sent out the base game for its test printing with our manufacturer. So they are working on printing up the game. It's going to be not every component that the game comes with, but enough of the components, the cards, the box, the dividers, the player aid cards, that we're going to be sending those out to people for overviews and reviews on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. That means we're all steam ahead on the Kickstarter front. The plan as of right now, we're trying to triangulate the exact kickoff date, because we have to do it there's I think Origins we were just talking about is happening near the date that we were looking at. So we don't want it to be on Origin weekend, and Magic the Gathering is releasing a product shortly in that time frame. So we're looking at trying to avoid the pre-release. So we're narrowing it down, but it is going to be a date in early June that we are going to put the Kickstarter live. And the plan is that if you really want the game and you want the first edition of the game with some special bells and whistles that we're probably never going to print again, get in on the Kickstarter. And after that, if the game is still popular, we're going to continue to probably print the base game for a few years. And then every so often we'll come up with a new base game, and that will be the main game that we print. And that will probably shift us into a new storyline as well. Like right now, our story is following three main adventurers, Jericho Stone, Ana Lucia, and Akaya, in their race against the broker to find the lost civilization of the Arakai. But we're going to make sure we conclude that story. Unlike One Piece, you're not going to have to read for decades to get to the end of that story. That story will be taken care of within those two sets. It's basically the base set is the start of the story, and then the multiplayer set that we're going to release later will be the continuation and the ending of that story. Some of the characters might go on to other stories in the future, but that story will end there.
Find us or the game at Moth Studios on TikTok, at Moth Studios on YouTube, at X_Seekers_of_Fortune on Instagram. And then there's X Seekers of Fortune on Facebook as well. And then, of course, xseekersoffortune.com or megamothstudios.com. And you can Google or ChatGPT either, and they're in the loop.
Get ready for the game that's hot. D12's what you've got. 12 questions gotta be quick. Can you handle it? Can you stick? D12, D12, roll the dice, answer well. D12, D12, will you triumph or fail? Rapid fire, no time to rest. Put your knowledge to the test. From gaming to UX, it's all a fair game. Answer right and you learn your fame. D12, D12, roll the dice, answer well. D12, D12, will you triumph or fail? With 12
So we play this game show.
Okay.
But essentially, it is just like this synthesized 80s animation
Love it.
kind of cartoon. And then we roll a 1d12 and we ask questions based on that.
Okay. I would like to request some gotcha questions for Joel. I will opt out of them. But...
Yes, I'm often left pantless.
You just stop right there.
we would definitely
Paragon or Renegade? Do you play the good path or do you take the bad path?
This is a great question because X Seekers of Fortune has its own version of Paragon and Renegade called Noble and Ruthless. And on our server, when you join our Discord, you get to choose which one you're going to be in. And I have taken the Noble side, which would be Paragon.
And I am also noble because the truly ruthless sleep with the sheep.
I'm going to take a shot every single time that you manage to plug your game. You have 11 more chances. Are you ready?
Oh, we're going to be 12 for 12.
What game is your like really guilty pleasure?
Yakuza.
Yakuza.
Yeah, I'd say that game series is just wonderfully, it's like a weird The Simpsons meets a soap opera set in Japan in the red light district. It's so funny. It's so heartwarming. It is one of my favorite experiences. I need to get back on it. My plan is to play every single Yakuza entry, not to 100% completion, but to beat the storyline. And I've taken a bit of a break ever since we started designing X Seekers of Fortune.
Probably Fortnite. I haven't been playing it recently. I started playing it with my son. I enjoy playing it a lot, but I always feel guilty.
That's amazing. That is the right.
Yeah, and I feel like there's someone looking over my shoulder, being like, "Why aren't you working?" Or
yeah. I would point out, I think the biggest stamp of approval is that Heather Ann Campbell of the Get Played podcast, who is a major gamer. She played it on a lark, almost like they did it as a joke on their podcast, and all of a sudden she became the biggest Fortnite fan. And I think if it has her stamp of approval, it's a good game. But also, should I mention how just like in Fortnite, X Seekers of Fortune has loot that you can find along the way, so that will make you better as a character. So be on the lookout for that in X Seekers of Fortune.
When we talk about offsetting
3 for 3
partnerships, like Joel's the shameless one, and I appreciate that about him.
What game should everyone play at least once?
I'll take this first because I have a passionate answer that has got cut out of one of our podcasts. But I think that Hollow Knight is the perfect game pretty much ever made. One of my favorites. It's just so wonderful. It's perfect game storytelling and perfect gameplay in my opinion. So yeah, Hollow Knight is my answer.
Metroidvania. We like that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting question for me. I don't know if I have a strong feeling that any game should be played at least once, but maybe chess or rummy, something a little bit more. I think maybe in part because it has been around for centuries. I think that if it's something that has been played for hundreds of years, there's probably a good reason for it. I like chess because chess is really the only game that immediately comes to my mind, although I guess maybe Go and some other games fall into this category of just being pure strategy. There is no luck component. I played chess growing up a lot. I feel like part of my DNA as a game designer and as a player is informed by chess. So
you're on the battlefield, you make an attack. Are you rolling with strength or dexterity?
I think in my younger years, I was a little bit more dexterous, but I'm starting to get that old man strength. Nothing compared to Tim here, of course. Don't let me rep the wrong way, but after doing enough manual labor, enough lifting for long enough, it's like that core strength is there. I think like I'm much more of a strength build now in my 30s than I was in my teens and 20s.
I'm going to go smarter, not harder, and go dexterous.
We had someone on here answer charisma once, I think.
I'll use my charisma to make them feel awful about themselves to the point where they self-sabotage.
Are they my mother?
Tell us about your mother. What is your go-to genre?
Sci-fi, I think, for me. I love science fiction. It's probably my go-to for fiction, at least.
I would say, I guess, it's kind of broad. It's like takes up like half of the dichotomy of drama and comedy, but I would say comedy is my go-to. If you're just talking about broadly genres, I think everything should have an inkling of comedy in it. Like if I watch a movie and it's like not funny at all, there's not like a sense of humor, I invest out. It's like it's like you can be dramatic, but even the most dramatic movie has a funny moment here and there in it, to relieve the tension. So comedy is my go-to.
Yeah, man. Total opposite. I hate joy. It's like even the Dungeons and Dragons movie. Like it's like the arguably the best like selling tool for D&D ever. And I was like, this is too fun.
This is how I don't want to be in your
What-
campaign then.
I'm more like solar punk. I just like Star Trek, and I think Earth 2 and things like we can have a doesn't have to be a dystopian future. We can live in harmony with nature and technology.
Now I want to play a campaign where you're just working at Walmart for just years on end.
When you're playing, whether it's a board game or TTRPG, this is more of a TTRPG centric, but do you prefer theater of the mind or like maps and miniatures?
I would lean towards theater of the mind myself, because I just feel like there's so much minutia to worry about. And when you're if it obviously, I guess it comes down to what style of game are we playing. If combat is the focus and we want to really do combat big, miniatures and maps. But if combat is supposed to be just something you get through to get to the next piece of story, let's not bog ourselves down. And honestly, I'd rather play a story driven game than a combat driven game, because if we're going to play a combat driven game, let's pull out something else like Warhammer 40K, something that was built around combat in the first place and built around miniatures. So yeah, I think my miniature is usually just there to be like, oh, look at my cool little guy. And otherwise, theater of the mind.
I disagree with everything Joel said, but I'm not going to elaborate.
I concur as well.
And if
Coming from
you want more quips,
Starfinder, I'm just like, this is hobby. I don't know what you say.
And if you want more quips like that, you can find them on the super secret podcast at Moth Studios.
Who is your favorite villain and your favorite hero in any space?
I like villains that are able to manufacture very, very complicated plans. I don't know. I mean, I definitely enjoy the Joker. I think that the Joker is interesting. I like a villain that is more than what they appear on their surface. Hero wise, just to switch properties here, I'll go with Indiana Jones. I hope that doesn't come as a surprise to anyone.
I may, and Danny, if you need some time to think more on your villain, I can go ahead and try to answer as best I can. Okay, so I think for hero, I think it's going to be Luke Skywalker. I'm just a like if you have me at your game, sir, I'm going to be playing a paladin for sure. I just love the holy knight figure, the was it the like wise warrior or the the noble warrior kind of thing, the philosopher warrior. That's probably what I'm looking for. And Luke Skywalker was just that guy. I was always the kid in class who was like, I think Luke is the coolest, when everybody else was obviously on Han's side. So Luke Skywalker for hero. And then for villain, oh, I just had one and then it slipped by. Whoa, come on, come back to me. Oh yes. I think in terms of like a villain that I thought was so great in their source material but has never been adapted properly, I'm going to give it to Ozymandias from The Watchmen, or from Watchmen, because Ozymandias is like one of the best, especially when Danny's talking about like the villain who has everything figured out. He like just him dropping the ball of like, no, you fools, this happened 15 minutes ago. I'm not monologuing and you're not going to stop me. It already happened. It was just wonderful. And I think it's doubly underscores because they haven't Watchmen the movie, horrible representation of Ozymandias. Watchmen the TV series, a little bit better, but still they never captured the, like, I think the quintessential line is like, there's a Rolling Stones article that's printed in the comic book that's written about Ozymandias, and it says that he has like a Tom Cruise style charisma, and I'm just like, it's right there, guys. He's not a effeminate British waif or whatever you want to say. He is Tom Cruise level movie star, and they never have caught that.
I think that if I'm going to go outside of the Joker, I'll probably go with Hannibal Lecter. Silence of the Lambs is my favorite movie, I think. Certainly amongst my favorite movies. But I'll give a runner-up to Joel.
What is your hottest take? This is so fucking stupid. What is your hottest take about your color modes? Are you RGB, CMYK, Pantone colors? Does this not mean anything to you?
I wish our graphic designer was here. LD would have probably just the most eloquent answer that would be totally clippable for TikTok. But I would say that since I mostly work digitally, I'm going to be in was it RGB mode most of the time when I was making the assets, and I don't think I ever converted them to CMYK. Ultimately, my opinion on this is use the tool or use the system, the color palette that is suited for what your end goal is, whether it be digital RGB or print CMYK.
As a cinema buff, can I say Technicolor? Is that allowed?
Yes, you can.
Yes.
Yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by
There you
Technicolor.
go.
I'll ask the interview question in place. What is your earliest memory of your most favorite game? Like your childhood game memory, or the best one?
Oof.
Well, I mean, it's kind of a cheat, but I remember the night my dad came home with a Nintendo Entertainment System that had the dual cartridge in it, because this was like probably close to the time the SNES was releasing. I mean, it was about to be totally out of date, but it had the dual cartridge with Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt, and I just remember, like, oh, now all of a sudden the TV is something I can play with. It's not just something that is on and I absorb. It is something that I can control and have like, a relationship with. Probably, probably doomed me to a life of indoor kiddom, being an indoor kid. But that was definitely the earliest memory and the sweetest memory because it just changed my world.
Nice.
I remember being at a birthday party when I was 5 and going into the birthday boy's room, and he and his older brothers were playing the original Mortal Kombat. And I remember thinking my generation's not going to be okay.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I mean that happened. I would say that my real more formative memory, besides watching a lot of Mortal Kombat when actually maybe it wasn't 5. I don't know how old I was, but it first came out. My stepbrother always used to. He was 13 years older than me, and I was a little kid, and I remember I would just stay up late at night and watch him just play through Sonic the Hedgehog, and he would just grind through the entire game, and I would stay up all night with him. I remember one time he was like, "Hey, are you hungry?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm hungry." He's like, "Here, I got some apple." So he gave me a piece of apple, but it turned out it was just an uncooked potato, and I never forgot that.
Oh God.
Yeah. He's an unusual person.
I think older brothers are supposed to prank younger brothers,
Yeah,
right?
it's on brand.
Well, you just mentioned Mortal Kombat. Best cheat code.
Ooh. Treating people with kindness and respect.
Boo. Get this guy out of here.
That's not nearly capitalist enough.
Yeah.
Exploit labor whenever you can. No.
Yay!
Yay, capitalism.
Yeah, start a chant, guys. Best cheat code. That is, I mean, not to sound like I'm on a high horse, but the best way of playing games is the way that they were designed and intended. With that said, I'd say probably DK mode. I deserve that. I deserve that completely. I would say probably just for fun, DK mode and 007. It's just so silly.
Mm.
Oh.
For the folks who are not nearly old enough, what happens in the DK mode?
Sorry, yes. Your character's proportions are blown up to look like Donkey Kong, so you have a huge head, long arms, and just a wider frame. I want to say, essentially, you become an easier target to hit. It's almost like playing, on easy mode for your, for your aiming purposes.
Penultimate question: what is like your favorite tool of the trade?
Question. I mean, I'll say I got a lot of good use out of Office Max printing and their
Nice.
what is it,
Nice.
the device that you use to just make a clean cut all the way across.
Paper
I had to
cutter.
make so many proxy decks, or what we call proxy decks or prototype decks, going into events like Comic Palooza and 405. And Danny can attest, like I was making like 3, 4, sometimes more decks, the sets of the game at one time. And it drove me a little batty from from time to time, but it was satisfying whenever I got to use that machine and just go, tsk, and create that perfectly cut line.
So I think honestly, Discord has been tremendously useful to us. Once we got to the point where we wanted to get deep into play testing and community building, and even honestly, at this point, we run a lot of our business off of Discord. So I don't know how advisable that is, but that's been useful for us.
Mhm.
We don't share documents on it per se, but we communicate in lieu of games or
Communicate,
what have
schedule.
you.
Play returns is gone from player to player. It rotates back around to you. You roll a d20. This is your final death save, and you fail. What are your last words?
Trust me, I got late enough. Oh,
It was Joel.
I love it. I love it. Those are the best. Those are good.
This season, we really promise Design Thinking Games is going to be more active on various social media. We understand as aged Gen Xers / millennials, elder millennials, that like, yo,
Wait. I'm firmly rooted in Zennial. I am a Zennial, so I am right between Gen X and Millennial.
okay. As a Zennial and a Millennial elder, we are we acknowledge that, look, like our social media game for the last 2 seasons hasn't been on point, but this season you're missing out if you're not following Design Thinking Games on the 3 T's: TikTok, Twitch, and Twitter. Probably in that order, as Twitter is a dumpster fire. Well, on TikTok, you can actually see Ben shooting some like excellent, like just like footage of some like of the really cool and interesting games we're playing. As you know, we look at games clinically and deconstruct them to the point of no longer being enjoyable, but that makes for some really good footage. The other thing you'll find there are like this kind of like network of amazing indie designers who we are interviewing, some of whom, or we're interviewing on this show for the season, and we're all going to be engaging there. We'd love for it. If you're into user experience, if you're into the player experience, if you're into the craft of game design, if you're into us, Design Thinking Games.
Thank you for listening and connecting with Design Thinking Games on TikTok, Twitch, and Twitter. You can also check out designthinkinggames.com to request topics, ask questions, or see what else is going on. Until next time, game on. Any final thoughts for our listeners, Rapid Protobot?
Destroy. Destroy.